Hello and welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We are part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm joined today by Billy Derrick and Luke Wyatt for the Roundtable edition. We'll talk probably almost all baseball, maybe some mailbag questions on other things. If there are mailbag questions on other topics, we'll hit those. Let's hope that the podcast is as interesting as the pre-podcast, Billy.
Indeed. It'll be a good one if it is.
It'll be if it's half as good, it'll be a good one. But let's talk about Anchor Impact for a minute, just off the top here, Billy.
Let's do it. Commodore Nation, you can get closer to Vanderbilt Athletics than ever before with Anchor Impact. They are the, of course, NIL collective for Vanderbilt. Gain access to unmatched exclusive coverage and be a part of a one-of-a-kind community. Got a good interview coming up here in the next week or two that I think you guys will like. So stay tuned for that. Behind-the-scenes content, stuff like the interviews, exclusive events, unique merchandise, and personalized experiences all create an unparalleled connection with the student-athlete journey. You become a catalyst for change, redefining the landscape of college athletics, which obviously we know is still changing. Big next few months, actually. Become a member today and be part of this impactful journey. Help the Commodores thrive and contribute now by logging on to anchorimpact.com/register.
Baseball season brought to you by our friends at the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro. A partnership began 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. They now serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, and North Georgia. They supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. For more information, visit their website at npmci.com and get your Purity ice cream and other products that they make. Ice cream season officially. It's always ice cream season, but now particularly with it getting hotter, stock your freezer with Purity products and others. All right, basketball season. Go ahead.
Had some Haagen-Dazs last night, Chris. Had to throw that out there.
There you go. Can't go wrong with
one of my favorites.
The Wash House sponsors basketball season and in the off season, which there's been a lot to talk about there too. Are you dreading laundry days? It's stealing time from the things you truly enjoy. Let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you. With 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area, just drop off your dirty laundry. Our professional attendants will give you back the one thing you can never have enough of. That is your time. Within 24 hours, you can pick up your nicely folded, fresh, clean laundry ready to be put away. Check out washhouseclean.com. Stop in, get your time back. Steve Andrews, good friend of mine. They do wonderful business. I think they've gotten some business out of this show. So if you happen to do some business with the Wash House, let them know. We greatly appreciate what they do here. All right, Vanderbilt is headed to Clemson again. I saw Tim Corbin on Tuesday, joked with them, said, did you expect to get St. John's in that pairing too? I said, I guess you couldn't because they were already off the board at this point. But we had a good laugh over that because 2 years in a row, Vanderbilt played St. John's in the Friday game and played Clemson in the regional. So anyway, yes, Vanderbilt will be headed to Clemson. It will face Coastal Carolina in game number 1. Coastal Carolina has an interesting story because Coach Gary Gilmore, who's been the coach there for a long time, won the College World Series in 2016. They were kind of a borderline NCAA tournament team. Coastal got in. He is a very popular guy, apparently one of the good guys in college baseball. Tim Corbin talked about how he sent him, I think, a birthday tribute or a retirement tribute or something like that. So they've got a relationship. I think they're 3 hours from campus. That will be a sentimental storyline. I think you'll see a lot of people rooting for Coastal to get through the Clemson Regional. And, of course, Clemson, Eric Bakich and his Vandy ties. We know all about those. Luke, your thoughts on Vanderbilt's draw in Clemson?
I don't like the field we're playing on. Except for that, though, I'm okay with it. We could have done worse. We could have done better. You mentioned the Eric Bakich connection. Tim and Maggie are the godparents of their children as well. So he's got a lot of emotional stuff going on there with it that he's going to have to compartmentalize besides baseball. We're extremely close. You know, I feel like this probably more so than any regional we've gone into. We have to win day one. You know, obviously you never want to fall in the loser's bracket, but in this one, I feel like if we don't win the first game because of our pitching situation, having to limit guys like McIlvain and Holton and Futrell, that we really need to get in that winner's bracket. If we do win game one, I like our chances. Otherwise, it could be a long or a short weekend, I guess you could say, in regional. I am happy with the way we've ended the season, playing the last 10 games. We've only had 2 what I call non-competitive games. The other 8, we played winning baseball, in my opinion. So I think we're going in a good spot.
Yeah, the Coastal story, Chris, is really interesting. Corbin obviously went into that in detail. First off, Corbin and Gilmore have been there forever at their programs. This 22nd year for Corbin, Gilmore, I think 29th. So well-coached teams, and it's kind of funny. Gilmore was speaking, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe it was before their conference tournament, and he was acting as if they weren't going to get in the tournament or they didn't deserve to be in the tournament the way he was talking. So for them to be in tells you they were one of the last 4 teams in, and D1 baseball actually ended up coming out with that. So whatever that's worth. I mean, if you're in the tournament, you're in the tournament, but I think that's noteworthy. Vandy got, lucky, I guess you could say, with one of the last 4 teams in with their for their 3 seed. But yeah, I mean, Corbin said they've grown up together as coaches. He loves them, so that'll be fun to see that matchup. And then Clemson, if Vanderbilt were to win and Clemson beats High Point, that'll be fun Saturday night. I mean, Vanderbilt's had some really successful regionals in Clemson, as we know, 2017, 2018. Clemson's 1-4 against Vanderbilt in the NCAA tournament, and Clemson has also lost their last 5 regionals at home. So they've really struggled. And at what point for Clemson in that game do you start to get in your head a little bit and you have another team from the state of Tennessee? Last year it was Tennessee, knocked them out as a 2 seed. Now you get Vanderbilt right back in your yard. And, Bakich is, I think the good thing for Clemson is that, because they didn't have, Bakich was not the head coach in 17 and 18. This is Bakich's second year. You have Jack Leggett in that dugout. So that's going to be competitive Saturday night if it is Vanderbilt and Clemson. But first, Coastal, guys. Coastal's a good team. They had, Chris, you know this about them. They started the year off well, but down the stretch struggled a little bit. They're 9-12 on the road, so they've struggled whenever they go away from home. They're 4-9 against RPI top 25 teams, so they haven't beaten a ton of really quality teams. Now 26 through 50 in the RPI, they've got 7 wins. So, but in that really top tier, the 1 through 25, they only got 4 wins. They hit well. They've got top 20 national rankings in both runs scored per game and on base percentage. They get on base. So Vanderbilt's got to avoid walks, I think, is a big thing. But you got to get by Coastal first to get to Clemson. But, man, Chris, what I look at is a potential Saturday night game between Clemson and Vanderbilt, which would be really fun to watch.
Here's what's interesting, and I'm just double checking this to make sure it's right. Let me check one more thing. Yeah, I would presume we'll see Bryce Cunningham get the ball in game 1. Coastal's lineup. Zach Beach, 16 home runs. Blake Barthol, 15 home runs. Both lefties. Sam Antonacci, their second baseman, who's got a .526 on-base percentage, lefty. They got a couple more lefties. Ty Dooley, their third baseman. Jake Brooks, their shortstop, Books, not Brooks. Both had respectable offensive seasons, not outstanding. Books was pretty good. Really good, actually. Lefties. So Cunningham's a righty. Cam Bodine, who had an OPS of close to 900, switch hitter. So I would presume he'd hit lefty. Now Graham Brown, their center fielder, who's maybe their best hitter, is a righty, and Derek Bender, who's good hitter, right fielder, and Dean Myhos, who's decent hitter, their left fielder, all right-handed hitters, as is their DH. But it is lineup with very pronounced left-handed tendencies. If you consider that, the switch hitter would hit left in that situation against Cunningham, who's a righty. So that's a little bit, little scary maybe, in terms of you would have liked to have seen maybe a more right-handed heavy hitting lineup. I don't know if Cunningham's got some reverse splits or something like that, but that's an interesting thing about Coastal's lineup as I look at this.
Yeah, one of the subjects I want to broach in this is the role that Jaden Davis will play in our lineup. Will he be inserted as the DH, or will he come off the bench? I don't see him playing in the field. I don't think Tim's going to mess with what we've done defensively. I think you'll see the same defensive lineup we had, with the exception of left field changing at times. That's kind of where I want to go with this, Chris, if you don't mind for a minute. What do you guys think would be that opening day lineup against Coastal?
I think, Chris, and I don't know if you agree here, but I think it should be at least the same lineup that won those first 3 games in Hoover, because I think they kept the same lineup where you had Hewitt in center. I want to say Polk in left, Holcomb at first, not in right, but at first, RJ Austin at second, Davis short, Vastine third. And who was playing right, guys? That was
Polk.
Well, I said Polk. Polk was in right. Okay, who was in left?
They switched in left field. They hit Hewitt in left some. Humphrey was a defensive replacement some. Right. And
J.D. Rogers, Florida. J.D. Rogers.
Well, and Rogers would play some right, and they would shift Polk to left. But I think we're missing somebody else too, aren't we?
Troy Leneve.
Yeah, Leneve played some, and
Bulger.
To your answer, I presume they're going to throw Riley Eichhoff, their starter, on Friday. He was their rotation was not that good. According to Friday starters, there 3 starters: Riley Eichhoff, Cam Flukie, Alexander Meckley, had ERAs of 5.30, 5.77, and 7.35, and also gave up a lot of home runs. So not a great park to pitch in. So I would think that maybe you would see Leneve in that spot, especially in a home run friendly part. I mean, the lineup's going to be the same. They're going to go Espinal at catcher, Holcomb first, Austin second, Diaz third, Vastine at short. I would not change that. Austin really, really started to shine back at second. So maybe a DH Davis,
Barzy.
Well, Barzy's been a fixture in the 5-hole for reasons that I think I still have a tough time explaining. But maybe you can throw Davis in there a little bit. Maybe Kojal could hit since he's a lefty. But I think I'm going to guess you'll see Leneve in left field with their starter probably being a right-hander. And now Clemson might be different. I'm going to guess they'll go Ethan Darden and Tristan Smith in the 1 and 2 holes. They could go Aiden Knack in the 2. That's probably what I would do. Knack's a righty. He's hands down their best pitcher.
Really good.
Darden and Smith are lefties. So I would think maybe if it's Knack in a game 2 situation with Clemson, you'll see that. But I mean, and Knack was hands down their best guy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, led the team in innings, 97 strikes. I mean, he's one of the better pitchers, you could say, in the country. Definitely one of them in the ACC. But I also wonder, Luke, about that. I mean, because they've got so many different guys they could fluctuate at that DH spot. I mean, if Leneve doesn't start in the outfield, is it him against Coastal? You got Kojal. You've got J.D. Rogers, I would guess. You've got Barzy. You've got Jaden Davis now. I have a feeling Jaden Davis he's going to have to play a role. If we look up 3 weeks from now, again, we don't know if it's going to happen. If we look up 3 weeks from now and this team's in Omaha, Jaden Davis has played a role. I think that's probably what that means, and he's come up big in big spots. Now, how comfortable is he going to be? Up in the box, he had that one at bat in Hoover, but I think that's a really big question to see. Does he play much? I mean, is it just a matchup thing that I don't think, Chris, they would send him back to second. I doubt they would do that, especially with the way RJ
with Austin. Yeah,
especially with the way Austin's playing. I'm also interested in the pitching. And we had a question about this on the board, so maybe we'll save it for later. But do you stick with Cunningham, Futrell, Thompson, because that's kind of the way they've been doing it, or the order they've been doing it the last few weeks? Do you move Thompson up to that second spot? That's something else that I think will be interesting. But yeah, that Jaden Davis question, Luke, that's probably one of the bigger ones for me. What role does he have, and how ready can he be for I guess that big moment for them?
Well, Chris, you brought up something too, and I guess we all three assume Bryce Cunningham will start, but with what you went through with their Coastals lineup, could you start J.D. Thompson against them and then go Cunningham against Clemson?
I think you have to hold Thompson to Clemson. Here's another thing I've noticed too is I've kind of surveyed the national scene, and I think this is smart. It feels like you're seeing more teams pitch their best guy in game 2. Maybe that's an anticipation for a regional. I just think Thompson's the guy with that heartbeat for the situation. I mean, I don't know that he's had an awful outing yet. So to me, and let me see what Clemson's handedness is in the lineup. Well, they're very right-handed, except in the outfield. Their starting outfield, 2/3 is left-handed, and their DH is left-handed, and they're all pretty good hitters, all on base percentages north of 400. Their dudes, Blake Wright is their leading home run hitter with 21. He's a righty. Jimmy Overtop, their catcher, slug 655, on base of 443. He's a righty, 19 home runs. So yeah, I mean, you could, the other option. Well, Holton's a lefty too.
And Futrell's a fly ball pitcher.
Yeah. Gosh, I still think you see Thompson in game. I mean, you could flip them. I mean, now that I look at this, but Cunningham was the last guy to get the ball. Cunningham got the ball first in Hoover, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's more. I don't know that rest is an issue at this point because Thompson pitched which game?
Yeah, he pitched against Mississippi State.
Okay. I mean, I think so much time has passed that it's not an issue either way. But
either way, I think Tim alluded to this when you guys were talking to him. He said, "Whatever we do, we're going to be consistent with it." So I think you may be right. You'll see exactly the lineup he had at Hoover by pitching, the rotation he had at Hoover. One other thing I want to talk about with pitching, right quick, if I can. Here lately it's been JD and then Futrell bridging it to Miller Green. Yeah. Now that we really need Futrell to be that third starter, I'm assuming because Carter Holton's been out so long, is he no longer? If we get in a situation, I'm looking ahead a little bit here, but if we get in a situation with JD, will we still use Futrell after him, or would you go straight to Cyber and then Miller Green?
I think that Saturday, that game 2 of a regional is so big that they might. I mean, in order to get that win, because when's the last time they won game 2 of a regional, Chris? It's been a while. I mean, 2021, that, the year they were in the final. So, they can do it. I mean, they're familiar with it, but yeah, Luke, that would be a big question. Now, are you wanting to save Futrell, Chris, and maybe save him for that third game potentially if that's going to happen, if the game's already in doubt? Yeah, that would be something to keep an eye on. But I mean, if you got Clemson on the ropes Saturday night and you can close out, I mean, that wouldn't close out the regional technically, but you could really have the edge. I don't know. I might go with that, Luke. I mean, just because, I mean, you get that game 2 of the regional win. I don't know what the percentages are, Chris. Most of the time you're winning. I mean, it's pretty rare you win game 2 of the regional and then you end up losing.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe Futrell won them a game 2 in Oregon State. Did he not?
No, he did.
You're right about that. Yep.
Years ago. So
I think
I don't know. Corbin's a creature of habit, but they haven't had as many routines this year. I mean, Holton started the year as their one, but you've seen Cunningham pitch in the 2. Maybe you can. I don't know. It has not has been. It has been the least continuity that I've seen between what they roll out between one weekend and the next. So it's been more that way for hitting than pitching, and some of pitching has been determined by injuries. But I guess if Tim Corbin wanted to lean on, because usually it's they got this guy throwing Friday, this guy throwing Saturday, and this guy throwing Sunday, and sometimes the Sunday guy changes in midseason, but typically, and some of that's because they've had dudes, top 10 picks in the draft that you're going to sit them in a spot and you're going to park them there and you're not moving them. This hadn't been that kind of team. Now you could see Cunningham sneak into the first round, and Holton, if he were healthy, I think would have done the same thing. But it's a little different. It's not like you're throwing out Kyle Wright on Fridays and he's just mowing everybody down like teams of the past. And some of that is just not a lot of people are doing that period this year because of the conditions that favor offense. But I don't know. I'd have to go back and look and see how many times in a row has Cunningham gotten a ball in a game one?
At least 4 weeks.
Yeah. I'm
going to check that. He got one in Hoover. He got it in Lexington. That didn't go well.
Be here.
Tennessee, I'm pretty sure he was the game one guy. He was.
Georgia.
Yeah.
And then Florida, too.
Georgia.
5 weeks.
Yeah, he was game one guy for that. Mississippi State, he was the game one guy for that. That was pitcher of the week. Florida. Yeah, okay. So he's been your game one guy for a little longer than I realized. So I think at this point, for Tim Corbin to move him out of that spot would be pretty much unprecedented for the way that he has conducted his career here.
The big question, guys, is going to be what they do. If you beat Coastal, what do you do Saturday against most likely Clemson? Clemson has 3 guys, Blake Wright, Jimmy Obertop, and Jacob Hinderleiter. All 3 of them have double-digit home runs on the season, and together they've accounted for 178 RBIs. So those 3 guys, if you stop those 3 guys, I think you can beat Clemson. Now, what pitcher do you use? Is Futrell the guy to do that? I don't know. Is J.D. Thompson that alpha guy that you need for that? I think maybe so. I'm not trying to make decisions here, but that's a big moment, and J.D. has come through in big moments. So that's going to be the question, I think, to be answered. Do you go with J.D. Thompson Saturday against Clemson? Now, it hasn't happened yet. I'm getting ahead of myself, but if it does, I think that's the big question that I'm looking forward to seeing answered.
One other pitching note, and this is the back end and kind of the emergency part of it. Carrying a 27-man roster, there's going to be someone left out of the regulars who I think will be Poteet, because that would be 4 catchers if you carry Poteet, because you're going to have Barzee, Bulger, and Espinal. So I think Poteet's the odd man out there. But on the pitching side of things, will it be Huseman or Leboke that's left off?
Boy.
That's a good one.
You got Huseman going against his former team.
Yeah.
Something
he got Leboke and maybe his last rodeo, and Tim has always been a guy who likes to reward kids who've stuck around. Leboke is can be an innings eater that can give you 3 or 4. Let's say you're up, 11-1 in the 4th inning of a
he's an innings
Sunday
eater.
morning game. Yeah, he's an inning. Huseman's not really that. Now, look, Huseman also a kid that could say, hey, I'll hit the portal again if he's left off the travel roster for a regional. And he was a very talented kid out of high school and hasn't come together yet. But, yeah, that would be very interesting. Yeah, I don't – is it 27-man, Luke, for this?
It's 27, not 28.
Yeah, I mean, usually that's not a – most of Tim's teams use 22, 23 guys, and after that there's a drop-off, but this one is not that team. This is the one time where that might matter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another thing.
Did we see Huseman in Hoover?
No.
That might be your answer.
It might be it right there. Another thing I'm looking for is pitching-wise, who is that second tier of the bullpen? We saw Kranzler pitch a little bit in Hoover. I thought pitched pretty well. Given the circumstances. Grayson Carter, what's his role? Because he's been a little shaky. Cyber that pitched okay in Hoover. Tennessee was able to rough him up a little bit, but overall I thought pitched well. Luke Guth, obviously he made a mistake against Christian Moore, but I still like Luke Guth as a guy that can go in there in a bright spot, a big moment. So, Luke, to me, that's what I look at, and that if Vanderbilt wins this regional, I think we're going to be crediting their bullpen because they've got to shut down the Clemson bats if they want to win the regional. But who are those guys that we're crediting? Is it Ethan McIlvain? Does Carter Holton come out of the pen? Considering how healthy he is, I still don't know if Holton pitches again, but we'll see. That's what I'm looking at. Does Futrell come out of the pen on a big Saturday night? So that, if Vandy wins this regional, we're going to be crediting the pen, the offense as well, but the pen because they would have shut down a Clemson team that is one of the better offenses in the country.
With the Carter Holton thing, I don't think there's any way he's not going to pitch. And here's why I say that. With only a 27-man roster, you cannot afford to have a guy on that 27. And Tim has said Carter is on the 27, basically, that can't contribute. I think you'd see him in a higher leverage spot, maybe to get you out of a jam in the 7th or 8th or 9th.
Yeah.
And the thing with Levi Houston, I will go back to this. He came from Coastal Carolina, and Corbs is big on giving you the opportunity to step up. So something tells me maybe Levi would be that guy, because if he gets into in his first game, he might go to Levi for an inning or something, or try to get a batter out that he's very familiar with or something.
Okay, I got a bunch of random thoughts here. Go ahead, Billy.
No, go ahead, Chris.
Well, first of all, Carter Holton. Here's a possibility. They don't really have a closer. I don't know that you can go Carter Holton for 80, 90 pitches. Maybe you can. If you can, great. If not, maybe you use him for 20 pitches at a time in in-game situations. Talk about a kid who's got the mentality to do it. I think that's Carter Holton. All right, I've got a list of what I consider to be their top 11 pitchers here. Cunningham, Thompson, Futrell, Holton, Cyber, Carter, Green, Ginther, McIlvain, Guth, Kranzler. That does not include either Huseman or Leboke. So if you're going to add one more, what you have here, you've got 5 righties and 6 lefties, and those. Oh, David Horn is another one who's a righty. I think Horn would be on that list. We did see him in Hoover. Your lefties, Thompson, Futrell, guys that can go longer stints. Green can go a couple innings. McIlvain can go a couple innings. Your righties are more shorter burst guys. Guth, Kranzler. Cyber, Carter can go longer. Cunningham. So I don't know. Maybe it's kind of close, but that would tend to make me think you'd probably go Leboke over Huseman, but who knows? I don't think we've guessed right on what's coming next all year. Number 3, home run rates among those 11 guys, best to worst, roughly. Thompson, 1.9%. Grayson Carter, 2.1%. Miller Green, 2.3%. Ethan McIlvain, 2.8%. Ryan Ginther, 3.1%. Devin Futrell, 3.3%. Carter Holton, 3.4%. Bryce Cunningham, 4.1%. Alex Kranzler, 5.1%. Luke Guth, 6.3%. Now, having said that, Cunningham, Holton, Futrell probably face better lineups on the whole. You probably saw Kranzler, Guth, some of those guys, maybe get a bigger proportion of their innings against in Eastern Kentucky as opposed to a Tennessee or a Texas A&M. Now with that, Guth's a kid who's come on and pitched well for them in bursts. But I don't know. Luke, I can't imagine, unless either Thompson gets hurt, which that would be an off the radar scenario, or something goes extremely right. I just can't imagine them going the first 2 games of the regional and Thompson not getting a ball to start. Can you?
Right. No, I agree with that completely. The other thing that we need to talk about the back end of, guys, is of the position players. Are we in agreement about Poteet being the odd man out there?
Yeah. I can't think of anybody else, because
you're not parking Espinal on the bench this weekend. at any point.
No.
No. I'm just saying the reason I have him as the odd man, I like Poteet's bat, but when you have three catchers already there, Bulger and Barzy,
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think there's anybody else that we've overlooked.
No, I mean, if Espinal were to go down, which would be catastrophic, Bulger would go in and catch, and then you've got Barzy as well. I'm with you, Luke. I don't think you need to bring four catchers. But back to, on this position group, guys, where would this team be without Calvin Hewitt the last month?
Ooh, yeah.
I don't think in the tournament. I was talking to somebody about Hewitt during the SEC tournament run, and he told me when Hewitt balls out, this team wins. When Hewitt is on, this team follows. They win because when he's getting on base, guys, he's a lot like Enrique Bradfield last year. He's on third a lot of times in 3-4 pitches because of how fast he is. It's unreal how the speed he has and how dangerous. When he gets on base, this team is clicking, and he's a veteran. He's a guy that has had to step up, and he stepped up. Now they need Davis. I thought Davis really came through a little bit, especially against Mississippi State with a big hit. You need more of that real Davis Diaz that you think that you think and you love. Vastine is still playing really well. Espinal as well. The veterans, guys, that we talked about having to step up have started to step up in some bigger spots, and that's going to be the key. But I look at Hewitt, guys, and again, without Hewitt, I don't think they're in this spot. And, taking him on the road, he's a great guy to have in the dugout, especially on the road in atmospheres like that. But I just look at Hewitt, and then also you go to the bench, Humphrey with speed as well. Bulger came up with a big hit against Tennessee. It didn't really end up mattering, but there's some guys all of a sudden now, when their depth plays well, it's good depth, of course. And now we're starting to remember the depth that we talked about before the season.
Yes. It's funny, I guess 2 podcasts ago, I was talking about how Calvin Hewitt was missing in action. He wasn't playing for a 2 weeks. He never saw the field.
He heard you, Luke.
Something clicked with him because, my goodness, you're right, Billy. Without Calvin Hewitt, we're probably sitting at home right now.
I did not realize this. He's the only regular or semi-regular on the team with a plus 400 on base percentage. That's crazy. Wow. There are not many teams in the tournament that have 8 guys in the lineup under 4. No, look, they got a lot of guys that are one good weekend or one good game away from getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Espinal's 394, Austin's 393, Vastine's 383, Leneve is 390, Polk is 377. So it's not like they're carrying. Well, they are carrying one in the 5 hole. Barcy's a 279. And Davis is 397. So I don't know. Maybe this is the weekend that Davis goes in as your DH since they've been using Barcy as a righty. But I think you've got to. They hit Hewitt in the 9 hole, and I guess maybe there's a school of thought of don't mess with what's working. But do you really want to lose a regional? Say you're in a title game or an elimination game. And you got the bases loaded, and because of where you hit him in the lineup, Calvin Hewitt is, 5 batters down the order with 1 out to go in your season rather than the next guy up. I think the way he gets on base, the way he's hit the ball, you've got to consider moving him out of the 9 hole. Now, maybe Tim's argument is that, hey, he doesn't feel a lot of pressure in the 9 hole, and that's why he's producing, and maybe that's valid, but I think that's a button that I might consider pushing.
Someone, guys, that we haven't mentioned, of course, is the 4th team in this region, High Point. Now, have we seen – I would assume Clemson plays them in the midweek. Is that correct?
I'll look that one up.
Because what they've done against Power 5 teams or,
Yeah, High Point's dangerous. They're probably one of the better 4 seeds. Yeah, they this first program appearance ever, I want to say. So they'll be, and you're at Clemson, so that that won't be easy for them. But you're right, Luke. They are a good team, and I think, Chris, did they end up playing them? I want to say they might have. I feel like I saw that earlier this season, but
I'm going to look it up as we're doing it.
That's another you'd rather be lucky than good thing. guys.
Yeah.
I'm not saying High Point's going to beat Clemson, but I think you'd rather be playing High Point Saturday night than Clemson.
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say if Clemson happens to use their number 2 starter, even though he's very good against High Point and then slip up and lose, or will they go with their ace against High Point?
Okay, Clemson and High Point. I don't think they played this year.
Can you look at
it on here unless I missed it? No, they did play Coastal. They were supposed to play Coastal Carolina. That game got canceled.
So did they play anyone like a South Carolina or? I guess
I'll look that up also. And keep in mind that baseball teams are very different depending on who's on the mound to start the game or who's on the mound in relief. And I'm going to get to that in just a minute with High Point. High Point played Tennessee, lost 7-4 in a February midweek game, played 3 against Ole Miss in Oxford, lost 7-3, 12-2, or excuse me, won 7-3 and then lost 12-2 and 25-2 in 7 innings, both those last two. So the pitching runs out pretty quickly. Played Dayton in a series, lost 2 of 3, a team that beat Vanderbilt. Again, gave up 10 runs and 13 runs in game 2 and 3. Oh, who else did they play of note? Let's see. Not a lot of NCAA tournament caliber teams here. Played Wake, lost 15-12 on Wednesday, May the 1st. And then that's about it. Ran through the conference tournament. Did throw a shutout in game 3 to win it over South Carolina Upstate. But here's what I was going to get at. Their number 1 is a guy named Gus Hughes. Led them in innings pitched with 95 2/3. Had an ERA of 3.95. That's the best among their guys that pitch much, other than one reliever. Actually, Cale Chatham, I guess, is their number 4 starter or reliever. He pitched pretty well. He had a 1.86 ERA, but it was just in 19 1/3 innings. The drop-off, their 2 and 3 aren't awful, actually. Looking at this, ERAs of 4.41 and 4.31. But Hughes, clearly their best pitcher. Now, he does give up home runs, 5.4% home runs, but he also struck out 104 guys in 95 2/3 innings. So he's a righty. Again, Clemson is going to be pretty right-handed heavy. So maybe that's a matchup that swings Clemson's still favored to win that game. Obviously, it should be, but that might tilt it just a little bit more towards High Point than you'd think based on that pitching matchup on Friday, presuming they go with Hughes.
This is what, they're not going to, obviously, I don't think High Point's going to win this region. I'm not saying that. But that first game right out of the chute, those 4 seeds are so dangerous because just about everybody has an ace. And it sounds like High Point has one.
Not now.
Well, relatively. A 3.95 ERA now is like a 2.95 ERA used to be. So if High Point comes out and pops Clemson, we've got a whole new scenario here. High Point's not going to win games late in this tournament. They're going to have to win that first game right out of the chute, and they'll put everything they can into that one game.
What do you guys think of Vanderbilt playing the early game? I think it'll be 11 a.m. Central Time because I don't think they hate it. I've heard from a lot of baseball players, especially at the college level, that they don't hate getting up, eating their breakfast and heading to the park and playing, as opposed to waiting all day and having to play a night game. So I think that probably does benefit Vandy because it's been rare, guys. Most Fridays in a regional the last 18 years, Vandy's been playing at night and they've been hosting most of them at least. So new territory, but I do like that. I don't know if you guys liked that or if y'all maybe thought about the night game as maybe being preferable for Vanderbilt.
Wear your white uniforms.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, wear your white uniforms. It's probably going to be hot. I'm looking up the forecast. I cannot imagine a scenario where 11 a.m. at Clemson is not going to be just blistering. I guess it's noon Eastern, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Let's see the 10-day forecast for Clemson according to weather.com. And Friday, okay, it's not as bad as I would have thought. Low of 55, high of 80, mostly sunny. 1% chance of rain. You can about throw that out the window because I feel like their rain forecasting hasn't. I mean, I feel like it's a bylaw that Vanderbilt's got to get rain delayed in a regional at some point. Although it's not showing it here until Sunday. 38% chance of rain in the AM on Sunday, according to this. So,
but something to watch this weekend too. And we do have a few mailbag questions, Chris. But where's that wind blowing? Because it's 320 down the line and right. I want to say 330 and left. But I mean, the balls just fly out of there. Remember 2018, Connor Kaiser had a 3-home run game against Clemson. Vanderbilt might need that from somebody, if they do want to beat Clemson. I don't know who it is, but you're going to have somebody step up that maybe hasn't in the last month or so. But the park is not favorable for Vanderbilt, but the other side of it is it's been favorable when they've played there in regionals. So I think that's when does it start getting in Clemson's head? I know I'm looking forward to a potential meeting there, but most likely that's what you'll see. Clemson, do they start feeling it, and when do they start feeling it? That's what I'll be looking for.
I'll give you a little counterpoint. Feels like Vanderbilt's hit a lot of deep fly balls lately that hadn't left the yard. Maybe
that's true.
Maybe it turns in their favor a little bit. I don't know.
And they're hitting the ball better as a whole now. I mean, I think
Sure.
we can agree. This is a different offensive team than a couple weeks ago.
Braden Holcomb doesn't need help getting it out of the yard. Alan Espinal doesn't need help getting it out of the yard. But guys like R.J. Austin, Davis Diaz, have stung some balls lately that didn't get out. Austin in particular, and Polk's another guy. Baseball's a weird sport, man. I never dreamed I'd see Connor Kaiser have a 3-home run game, and he did it in that park. I mean, I think what do you have 6 home runs for his career or something like that?
Yeah,
3 of them in the same game.
Yeah,
that's a weird park. I mean, he had one of them that just barely got out down the right field line that just kind of poked it out. And I think he had one just barely down the left field line. So Vandy's going to need some luck on their side. They're good enough to win this regional. You just got to go out there and do it. I think that's the biggest thing. But baseball is weird, Chris. And it's kind of a weird park. It's weird things have happened in regionals there. I mean, think back last year. How many innings did they play Tennessee and Clemson, Chris? Was it 12?
I don't remember.
13?
That was the Saturday game.
Well,
yeah, that was a marathon.
Well, if you remember, Billy Amick, who now plays for Tennessee, hit a home run to put Clemson ahead. And then Tennessee was down to their last pitch. And
Denton,
the kid that transferred from Alabama, hit the game winner for them.
Yeah. One more thing on High Point. I kind of keep just a computer composite with about 3 that I trust and average them out. It's got High Point being the 5th best of the 4 seeds. And this is the team that did have 5 guys with double-digit home runs. So, for Clemson, now their Friday guy, Ethan Darden, did not give up a ton of home runs. In fact, their starting pitchers didn't give up a lot of home runs, right around 3% or under for all those guys. And Knack, by the way, back to Aiden Knack, the guy that's been their best pitcher but has also been their 3. He's been pitching more in that 3 role lately, and it looks like that 2.96 ERA may have been bolstered by maybe some out-of-conference performances because lately he's been a 4-inning guy. He gave up 6 in one of his last 2 or 3 starts, so I don't know if this is a guy that the effectiveness has maybe waned as the season goes on, it seems. But anyway, he on paper is the best of their 3 starters, but it seems like they've been consistent at pitching him in the 3 hole. So that would be if Clemson goes 2-0, he'd be a Sunday night championship use guy.
For the fans out there, Chris, and Billy, who's a great comp in the SEC to Clemson?
That's a good question.
Give me a minute to think that through.
Chris, I was going to say Georgia, But
No, their pitching's better than
Georgia's got.
Georgia's.
I'm going Alabama.
Yeah,
don't hate
that might be a good one.
Where would they be in the SEC, Chris? Where would Clemson stack up?
6-ish.
I kind of agree with that because a lot of times because they've had SEC teams going to their park, they haven't seen that level of physicality and just depth of pitchers a lot of times. There's some depth in the ACC. The ACC is the second best conference, I think we would agree. But it's a little different when you get an SEC team coming into your park, even when they're a 2 seed. And I think if you ask Backage, him watching the selection show on Monday, I don't know that he was thrilled to see Vanderbilt in his regional.
I think Alabama's the closest comp I've got style-wise. There's not really one that jumps off the page because they don't really have an ace unless you consider that Knack. But if Knack were an ace, he wouldn't be pitching out of the 3-hole lately. They don't really have a stud reliever. Yeah, it's they don't have Knack's the only guy with the strikeout rate over 30%. They got Drew Titsworth's one of their relievers. He's 30% on the nose, but he only threw 19 in the third. He was effective, but either he was hurt or they just didn't trust to use him in big spots.
That's a good question. I was going to think about South Carolina as a potential comparison. I think
that might be one too. Although their starting pitching was a little bit more durable than Carolina's.
Yeah, they played a couple games and South Carolina lost both of them.
2-1 run games, if I recall. Yeah.
2 1-run games. So, and we know Vanderbilt went and got swept against Carolina, but I think if Vanderbilt and Carolina played on a neutral field, the way Vanderbilt's playing right now, I'd like Vanderbilt's chances. Like I don't know. It'd be interesting to see. I know that was early in the year. They played back in March, and that's the other thing, guys. Like High Point's a team that they played really well first half of the season, and so did Coastal. I think Coastal's a team I'm talking about. Coastal, Chris, I think you mentioned this. They were hot. I mean, I think most of the year they were like, and we're getting in the tournament, but they started to fizzle out late. That's another thing you got to look at. When you look at numbers early in a season, you got to put the caveat on, and that was in February or that was in March. So
I'm going to look up one more thing while we're doing this. I want to see like who in this regional is a draft prospect. Because I don't think there's a lot
Canarella.
Yeah, he would be one, but I don't know he's a first rounder.
No, there might not be any first rounders.
I'm looking on MLB Pipeline. The biggest major league prospect for this coming draft is Bryce Cunningham at 33. I don't see, as I'm going down, I don't see anybody. I'm through the top 50. I don't see anybody else. Tristan Smith, their lefty, is the number 62 guy. Again, he's been, I think, their number 2. Yes. So that could be the guy that Vandy sees in a game 2, presuming that the higher seeds win. What else have we got here? I'm going to keep scrolling and see what I can find here.
It's really just Tristan Smith for Clemson, which is kind of surprising.
Cam Camarella's been a name in college baseball. He's been a good hitter, but I mean, it's just been such a year for hitters that and he's not a huge power guy. He's got 9 home runs, slugging 342. So that doesn't get you. I don't think that gets you drafted this day.
This late in the year, Chris,
I might have the slugging wrong, but anyway.
This late in the year, I always look at innings pitched for a pitcher and say that's got to be their best guy because that's who they're allowing to pitch more, and that's who the coach trusts.
Yeah.
So innings pitched, is that the guy that will probably open or?
Tristan Smith, he only threw 41 innings this year. I don't know if he was hurt, and it wasn't that great when he threw. ERA was 4.17, but other stuff suggests it should have been worse than that. I think Carter Holton, if I just see Carter Holton on this list, and they've only got a 150 at the moment. It'll be a 250 later. I could have sworn Holton was in the 40s or the 50s here a couple of weeks ago. Oh, no, here he's 47. So he's not falling out of that top 50. So there, I would have been surprised. You don't usually see that kind of movement that late. So there's been some thought that Carter Holton's performance has killed his draft stock. That's, MLB pipeline is run by MLB, and I think they consult their scouting bureaus. So still a top 50 guy for the draft, and that also includes high school kids. So,
yeah. Y'all ready for this mailbag?
Sure.
All right. Mailbag brought to you by Sutherland and Belk, family-owned injury law firm. If your loved one is in need, I was trying to memorize that read, Chris.
I've got it.
I don't have the number. There you go.
If you were a loved one's been in an accident, I'll let you pull
there
them
you
up
go.
and I'll read this. Give Taylor Russell a call. I should have taken my cue better there. 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Also presented by John Levin and the Maynard Nexus Government Contracts Group, which advises government contractors on all aspects of their needs with a proud focus on matching legal solutions to business needs. They got their very own Chris Lee. I don't know if he could start for any of these teams in this regional, but you could ask him. Anyway, help out the folks who help our show. And let's field the mailbag questions.
All right, Vandy Jag 02. What is the likeliest pitching rotation for the regional? We talked about it a little bit earlier. I'm going to say Cunningham, Futrell, and then Thompson. I feel like that's what they've gone with the last several weeks here. I could easily see Cunningham, Thompson, and then maybe Futrell for the game 3. But just feeling it out, if Vanderbilt were to lose that game 2 and then have to play game 3, of course, then you'd like to have Thompson. So I don't know. It's tough, but my gut tells me Cunningham, Futrell, Thompson, but I'm not super confident in that. So I don't know about you guys.
I have Cunningham, Thompson, and then if you're not using Futrell as a bridge guy, it will be him. But if he comes in after JD like he's done before, I'm going to say surprisingly Carter Holton.
I think Thompson and Thompson and Cunningham are your top 2 in some order. And Carter Holton is the wild card of this whole thing, guys.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just hard for me to believe that he's going to go out there and throw 100 pitches in a game, but you just never know. Again, could they use him in a closing situation? I don't know. Could you see Brendan Cyber get a start or something resembling a start? Maybe. I don't know. I think if it's anything other than Futrell and Thompson, not Futrell, Cunningham and Thompson in some order in game 1 and game 2, I would be surprised, unless it is an out of the box Carter Holton's 100% kind of situation.
Something we didn't touch on, guys. Grayson Carter, he was pitching great against Mississippi State, and then as soon as the first thing went wrong, he couldn't throw a strike. Now, what that is, I have no idea. But, I mean, he got the little dribbler back to the mound, made the wild throw to first, and he fell apart. I don't understand why a veteran kid like that would have. I'm not picking on Grayson, but I just feel like he has a role somewhere in here where they're going to have to turn to him at some point because his stuff's just too good.
He's got to control. I mean, when he controls, he's fine. He's got to lead the team in walks, Chris. I mean, he's just got to control. He can do that. He'll be fine.
You've seen it with him. First game of the year, right? He's getting the ball to start the year. They call him out on his delivery. Said he can't do that. It just falls apart on him. And maybe that's an unfair comp. You're used to pitching a certain way, and then they say, hey, you can't do that. But I don't know. It feels to me like he is a 1 or 2 batter to keep the ball in the yard guy. And maybe if it goes well, you let him pitch till something goes wrong. Or maybe it's the Sam Laboki situation where you're up, 8-1 in the 8th, and you bring a guy to eat innings when you got more baseball to come. But I just can't at this point, it's hard for me to trust giving him the ball in a big spot with a close game for a lengthy period of time.
Before we go back to the mailbag, guys, who's the Richie Goodnow on this team?
Who's that?
Chris can explain that, I guess. Chris, this is just for you, I guess. Who is the
for Billy's benefit, Richie Goodnow was a kid who was, probably the 11th, 12th pitcher on the roster, Nashville kid, public school kid. And they were in a game, I believe it was one of those Sunday morning elimination games. And he threw like 8 or 9 shutout innings or something like that through the game of his life. There was never one before that and never one after that was anything like that again out of Richie Goodnow. Sam Leboki. Different script because Sam has had his moments before. Luke, you got yourself on mute here, I think. Or we can't hear you.
Oh, no, we lost Luke. Try to hop back in here, Luke. That's a good question, though. That's intriguing because Goodnow, Chris, I guess, was a younger guy at that time, right?
I don't know. He'd been on the team 2 or 3 years, I think.
You guys got me?
Now we got you.
Okay. Yeah, I would say Grayson Carter's that guy.
Could be.
And they'll need it. Okay.
Could
Jack
be Alec
Wagon.
Transler. So.
Yeah.
Good point.
All right, old Jack Wagon. Curious about the Coastal matchup. Not familiar with this year's Coastal team. How will Vanderbilt match up with them in that first game in that ballpark, and what are the keys to victory in that initial matchup that might be unique to that opponent? Well, it's interesting. These two teams have never played. It's first meeting between these two. And you look at it, Coastal, their strength is offensively. They don't boast the best pitching staff in the country. But like I said earlier, they get on base. They've scored runs. 8.7 runs per game. That's 14th in the country. On base percentage as a team is .420. You mentioned earlier about Vanderbilt's, Chris. I don't think Vanderbilt's is anywhere close to that. Sunbelt all-conference first-team duo of second baseman Blake Barthol, third baseman Sam Antonacci. They're both hitting over 300. So the pitching staff is where their weaknesses lie, though. I think if Vanderbilt can just keep hitting the way they have been, I think they'll be fine. But they've also got to limit Coastal. And, if it's Cunningham, he's going to have to keep the ball in the ballpark and not a park that's not necessarily favorable for pitchers. But it's the same park Vanderbilt's playing in. So I could see this maybe getting high scoring, maybe a 10-5, 10-6, something like that, with the way Vanderbilt's hitting the baseball and Coastal's lack of dominant pitching. I could see Vanderbilt running away potentially, but Coastal's dangerous. That they've got a great pedigree, as we know. This is their last year for their coach. And it is kind of funny. He may rather, he would obviously rather be coaching his team right now, but I think there's part of him that is also looking forward to being on the beach and being retired. But he's in the tournament, and that'll be interesting to see motivation-wise where is Coastal. But like we talked about earlier, Chris, it's Coastal's got not the best pitching staff, but they can hit the baseball, and they get on base. So Vanderbilt's got to be careful. And Luke, and I mentioned this earlier, walks. You got to limit the walks. Vanderbilt always has to limit the walks, but especially against this Coastal team, because that's where they can really bite you.
Yeah, the thing that scares me, guys, is you got a guy that the team, obviously it sounds like he's a well-liked coach. And when you have kids realizing this is his last rodeo, I think they're going to bust their butts to try to do everything they can to win a game. So that's the part that probably worries me more than any of the other stats and so forth.
Yeah, everybody in the baseball universe is going to be rooting against Vanderbilt in this spot. That's just going to be part of it. I think pitching location's a big thing. I'm looking at their top 11 hitters. All of them have got walk rates north of 10%. So that's the thing. They all can take walks. They also strike out a lot. Beach 31%, Barthol 23, Dooley 23, Books 26, my host 21, and Corey Zintek, who's I guess a part-time DH, 31. So that these guys also, other than Caden Bodine, their catchers, strike out a lot too. So this is kind of a three true outcomes team where they strike out a lot, walk a lot, and put over the fence a good bit.
Didn't I read somewhere too where they're like hit by pitch? They get hit by pitches a whole lot. Is that not true?
Really?
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised with their on base percentage. I mean, and that's a strength and a element of a well coached team. So this could be a fun matchup too. We talk about a potential matchup with Clemson, Gilmore versus Corbin. There will be some interesting chess match plays in that one. I think potentially, especially if it's close late, just to see what decisions are made.
As a sidebar, when I was watching in Hoover, I was astonished at how close these guys stand to the plate these days.
Oh.
You see the batter's box starting to get rubbed out, and I mean there were guys that I'm like, if there was a line there, they might have a toe over it. In some cases, it's really amazing.
It's because of all the armor they wear now on their arms and elbows.
Yeah.
A pitch.
Have y'all noticed how far Calvin Hewitt stands away from the plate? But with his swing, he steps in and he almost points himself to right center field, which is how you're coached typically, inside out. I noticed that though. Like how Hewitt's been the opposite, where he's, it's almost like Jason Hayward, Chris, remember for the Braves. He seemed like he was so far away from the plate, but find a way, and it's working for Calvin. So I don't think I'd change that. But y'all remember Brian Harris, of course, who, I mean, he had to lead the country and hit by pitches. Okay. Speaking of Brian Harris, I think this guy coached Brian Harris, Eric Bakich, Clemson head coach, the Admiral VU. Good question. I don't think I can answer any of these, but Chris or Luke, do y'all have any cool Eric Bakich stories from 03 to 09 when he was an assistant here? I don't think Bakich is I don't think he's a headline type guy or a rah-rah. Like he's down to business, but I'm interested to know.
I've got one.
I'll let Luke go first. You go ahead.
I said I've got one, but I'm so sorry I can't tell it. It was on a thing I saw on a I'll just say this. It was something I saw on a recruiting weekend.
He used to coach third. Go ahead.
I said I'd tell you guys later after.
Okay.
I apologize to everyone else.
I believe he used to coach third in 07 when on that staff. Did he not?
I thought he coached first always.
Maybe I used to. They were very aggressive in sending runners, and I used to refer to it as Eric Bakich's flying circus. And it seemed like they got thrown out taking an extra base about once a game. But he and Tim both had that pedal to the metal mentality around that time, and that was an interesting. And by the way, I loved Eric. Was such a nice guy to me. He's a guy that I've rooted for everywhere he's been since he left Nashville.
Great guy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. Bakich said it all comes back together, especially with Corbin coming back and Leggett being in that dugout. That's just something to keep an eye on too. All right, last one here. VU Superior. Last night, I don't know if any of y'all watched, but Vanderbilt's behind the scenes all access SEC network of their spring practice premiered last night. It was pretty good, but this question in the SEC video last night, CJ Taylor was adamant about the improvement in the overall team he sees. With all the new players and coaches in the really weak areas of offensive line, quarterback, wide receiver, and secondary, do you think we've done enough to be competitive against the lower half of our schedule? That's a good question, and it's still really early. I don't know if I would say all of those positions. I still think offensive line is a big question mark. And right now, I know we've talked about Pavia and Nate Johnson, but quarterback is a question mark as well. I think receiver, they've gotten better, especially bringing in Micah Bell from Notre Dame. I think they've got a little bit of depth there, but at the same time, receiver is not a strength of this team. in secondary. I think secondary is probably the most improved out of those position groups that you mentioned. Just with the guys they brought in, Randon Fontenette, Dante Carter are both going to play a ton. So still early, but guys, I am in believe it when I see it mode. But also they brought in some guys that I think transfer wise will impact. I mean, the Liberty kid I think is going to start. They got the guy from they got the Hubbard kid from UTSA who'll probably end up starting. I mean, so they did what everybody wanted them to do, and so it's just about, I think, going out there and executing. And so, lower half of their schedule, it should. I mean, you made all these changes. I think at least the lower half you should be competitive against. Now, upper half, that's obviously a bigger question, but lower half, I think so. It's just a matter of can you win in that fourth quarter? Do you have that depth to come through? I think that's what probably a lot of these games will come down to.
I think they've got an identity on offense that they tried to have a year ago. It didn't work. And a guy that's, a quarterback and a coordinator who've been used to doing that, changing the offensive line helps. Defensively too, Billy, I sat and watched practice last year. I'm like, I don't know how they're going to cover anybody. I feel like they've upgraded at corner. I mean, some guys that have had some success at other places. And I just never understood what Nick Howell brought that they liked. I think some addition by subtraction and by a guy that's coach comp. No, his talent at Notre Dame was a lot different than his talent at Vanderbilt. But I feel like they really got a lot better on defense just with some coaching changes and with bringing in some guys who can cover a little bit. They got some depth on the defensive line and some guys that have been in rotations before. So, look, I feel like last year the talent, in hindsight, we put too much stock into them winning 2 games in the year. And it all fell apart. But they also had some locker room issues. And I think some of the guys that caused some of the problems are elsewhere now, too. I think that's going to help.
Guys, we're talking about Coastal Carolina. If the fans want to have some fun in their downtime, go watch some film. And I'm not saying we're going to execute as efficient as they have, but go watch some of Coastal Carolina's offense. You're going to see a lot of that in what we do at Vanderbilt.
Interesting. Very interesting. With Grayson McCall?
Yep. We don't have Grayson McCall, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. That is interesting. Yeah, I'm hearing some good things. Of course, everybody's on campus. When they start, Luke? They haven't started yet with summer. Yeah,
it's on right now. Yeah, it's May.
Yeah.
May, yeah. Well, actually, they started this week.
Okay. Yeah. I saw Pavia is going to be wearing number 2, and then Nate Johnson is going to be wearing number 8. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, that's what we got in the mailbag.
Well, gentlemen, I got to move along to get some other stuff done. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks to our sponsors. You can see them on the screen if you're listening. Sutherland & Belk, Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, Wash House, Maynard Nexon, and of course, Anchor Impact. For Luke Wyatt and Billy Derrick, I'm Chris Lee. Thank you for watching and listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast.